Hello, I'm Kristen, and I'm going to be presenting my speech today on the Death with Dignity Act. I'm sure we've all heard about it on the news as well as social media over the past couple of weeks. I consider myself a credible source because I've done some extensive research on the topic, mainly when it comes to people ending their lives having to do with a terminal illness. The title of my speech is A Choice at the End for New Hampshire. With age comes the reality of death around you. And with that, I wondered what options the people of New Hampshire had in the event that they were ever diagnosed with a terminal illness. I initially asked myself because my dog recently turned 14, and I've also had to recently deal with the death of loved ones, some lucky enough to die instantaneously, yet some were drawn out with immense pain and suffering. Before that point, I never really thought about it, and I kind of assumed that New Hampshire, being the live free or die state, already made this legal. But unfortunately, they have yet to do so. Legalizing the Death with Dignity Act has been a touchy topic that has weaved its way across the U.S., including our very own New Hampshire, for decades. The act isn't just about ending a life. It's designed and intended to allow a competent terminal patient a choice, even if they decide not to take the lethal dose in the end. In an article titled Dying for Control by Rachel Goodling, she makes note that more than 1,000 terminally ill people in Oregon have been prescribed the drug, with only about half of them actually taking it. With that said, and being the literal person that I am, I enjoy living in New Hampshire for its many personal freedoms. And according to an ongoing study by the Free State Project, we consistently rank in the top 5 for being considered one of the most free states, and factored into that are personal freedoms. Also, as listed under our own state law, we are 1 in 3 states that place no helmet restrictions on motorcyclists. We also leave it up to the adult drivers, as well as passengers, as to whether or not they want to buckle up. Giving adults these very freedoms should also be extended to the terminally ill because they have a right to a choice as well. Each day we all have many choices, for instance, between generic or name brand items, despite all essentially having the same end goal in mind. This can also be said when comparing hospice care, refusal of treatment, as well as the Death with Dignity Act, which all essentially lead the patient to an eventual death with minor differences in their paths. For example, hospice care involves a high dosage of pain medication and constant monitoring until the illness finally takes over. Per Medicare, they state that for those who can't afford to stay in their own home or with family, they'll be required to move into an approved facility, and oftentimes with a fee of its own. I can only imagine how much additional stress that puts on the patient as they enter an unfamiliar area to essentially die. Then there are those who know the end is near, and they eventually choose to refuse certain treatments and/or medications to avoid struggling to the end. Death with Dignity is really no different, if not better, as you actually have the ability to orchestrate a proper goodbye, and when it's time, you can choose to take a lethal prescription, all while maintaining self-control of your body and mind. Now, there is no denying that as adults, we will continue to cross death's path, and I expect all options be available when that time comes. Because if you were given a potential painful expiration date, it's only right to also be given the choice to end your life in those final stages. Let's take the recently passed Mayor Menino, Brittany Maynard, as well as an elderly Pennsylvanian couple, for example, all involved with being diagnosed with a terminal illness, yet they each took a very different path to the end. In Mayor Menino's case, he underwent months and months of treatment before ultimately deciding to stop. On October 20th, he stated during an announcement that while he continued to fight this terrible disease, he felt it was time to spend more time with his family, grandkids, and friends. He also added that he was hopeful and optimistic that one day the talented researchers, doctors, and medical professionals in Boston will find a cure for this awful disease. In the case of Brittany Maynard, the 29-year-old who chose to end her life before the illness took her over, she was known for being adventurous, brave, athletic, and strong, and wanted to be remembered for that as well. She chose to end her life this past weekend to avoid succumbing to the brain cancer. She even added in a recent interview with People magazine that for anyone to argue against this choice really seemed evil, and that people try to also mix it up with suicide, and that it's not fair, because there's not one single part of her that wanted to die, it's that she was dying. As for the elderly couple in their 80s from Pennsylvania, they had no legal option to choose from in order to choose a humane death, so the couple decided to take matters into their own hands. As stated in an article, Getting the Freedom to Die by Roy Speckhart, the wife had her husband kill her rather than letting the illness take its course. Imagine killing your spouse because the laws could not help you. Choosing to die should not be something that is forcing people to end their lives in this manner. Now, we all, for the most part, feel empathy, as well as cringe at the thought of another person or even animal having to suffer. So ask yourself this: who are we to tell a terminally ill person to stick it out because it's a better choice than dying? Or that if they want to end their suffering or battle, that they should refuse care or go into a coma-like state? Or even better, resort to having a loved one kill them. It's wrong and against one's freedoms to not be given the choice when there is a perfectly viable alternative out there. This is where New Hampshire needs to come together and get this choice added to the personal freedoms that are already in place. Thank you.